the real interest rate. And there's typically four that we talk about. One is the expected future marginal product of capital. How productive or how profitable do we expect capital to be in the future? So if you expect capital to be more productive in the future, then there's a good chance that today you'll want to make more investments so that you'll have a bigger capital stock in the future, so that you can actually earn that higher rate of return. The second factor is what happens to the effective corporate tax rate. Just as individuals care about the after-tax income, what we call disposable income, businesses care about their after-tax cash flows or revenues. So the current marginal product of capital can be dependent upon the effective corporate tax rate. Third, business confidence. So this is simply the analog to what we saw with consumers. How optimistic or pessimistic are business executives? And then finally, technology. And here I do mean technology, not total factor productivity. Technology changes can lead to total factor productivity changes, but they don't necessarily lead to total factor productivity changes. So just as an example of a technology change that had a big impact on investment, although it also had an impact on total factor productivity, think about the commercialization of the internet. Right? All of a sudden, in the late 1990s, we've got the commercialization of the internet. All of a sudden, every company in the world had to have their own websites. They had to be on the internet. They had to be able to use the elementary tools that we had 15, 20 years ago on the internet in order to do business. It did not matter what interest rates were. Everybody felt that they had to make those kinds of investments in newer computers, newer communications gear, new routers, so on and so forth. Right? So we ended up with a big change in investment taking place because of that. Now, as I said, that actually did lead to a big increase in total factor productivity, but we can think of other changes in technology where that would not be the case. So here, then, is our investment function. Again, if we wanted to write it more specifically, we would say investment equals I bar minus some parameter, call it D, times the real interest rate. So we now have a negative function between investment and the real interest rate. So this is the demand for loanable funds. Let's put the real interest rate on the vertical axis, desired investment on the horizontal axis, and because it's an inverse function, it will be downward sloping. And that's what we end up with. When the real interest rate is high, businesses don't want to borrow as much, and investment activity will be relatively low. When the real interest rate falls significantly, then the cost of borrowing has gone way down. Businesses will borrow more, and we'll have a higher level of investment. So notice that we're simply moving down along this curve as the interest rate falls. Okay, so now we can think about how do we actually determine what the real interest rate is and what causes it to change. Okay? So for the rest of today, we're going to work with what is known as a closed economy. In a closed economy, there are no imports or exports. So we basically have no international trade. So notice what that means is that net exports equals 0. So we don't have to worry about net exports. We're going to relax that assumption on Thursday and see what that means. We're also going to assume that prices are fully flexible. So all that we need to worry about is equilibrium points. How we get from point A to point B, both of which are equilibrium points, without having to worry about what process things, the process with, or the path with which variables change over time. And that makes this, by the way, a long-run analysis, in which case we can also assume that all markets are in equilibrium, because that, in fact, is what we mean by the long run. Okay. So now we've got our national income identity. Y equals C plus I plus G. Notice there's no NX out here. That's disappeared by assumption. National saving is the same. Economic output minus consumption minus government purchases. We can take C plus I plus G, substitute in here. You'll notice we've got a plus C and a minus C, a plus G and a minus G. So what we're left with is equilibrium is national saving equals private domestic investment. Private domestic investment. Okay. So that's our equilibrium condition. So what does that look like? Here's our desired investment curve. Here's our desired saving curve. Point A gives us our initial equilibrium, real interest rate. The supply of loanable funds is exactly equal to the demand for loanable funds. And what we see there is that saving is identical to investment. So when we ask, how are real interest rates determined in an economy? It's determined by a supply and demand analysis. What is the supply of loanable funds, right? How much saving is taking place in the economy? And the demand for loanable funds. How much private investment is taking place in the economy? So those are the types of things that we need to look at. Now, we would also be interested in how does the real interest rate change? Right? So we've got our closed economy, but if you remember, national saving is a function of autonomous consumption, taxes, and government purchases. So changes in any one of these three are also going to have an effect on national saving. So let's suppose that we have a reduction in government purchases. So we reduce government purchases. What would happen in this model? Investment would go up, savings would go up. Definitely investment and savings will change. But what do we show? So notice that if we're at point A, in terms of equilibrium, we're right here at point A. We're not moving off point A unless either the desired saving function shifts, or the desired investment function shifts, or both of them shift. Right? We're already in equilibrium. There's no reason to move out of that spot unless a new equilibrium is being created. But now we've got a change in government purchases. In this case, we reduce them. So which function is that going to affect directly? Investment or saving? Saving, right? Y minus C minus G. So if we reduce government purchases, does national savings rise for every interest rate level or fall? Okay. So for any given level of income, will there be more national saving or less national saving? More, right? So our desired saving function has now shifted to the right. And what we see happening here is that at our original real interest rate, we have an excess supply of loanable funds. That excess supply, like in any other market, is going to push the real interest rate down, the price of loanable funds, until we get to a lower real interest rate at R1. Notice what's happened. Saving has gone up and investment has gone up. They're still equal because we're now in a new equilibrium at point B. So the initial change here was the change to government purchases. This causes the saving function to shift to the right. At the original real interest rate, there's now an excess supply of loanable funds. Competition in the marketplace will push down the real interest rate. As the real interest rate falls, the demand for loanable funds will be increased. Right? We'll be moving down along the investment function as the interest rate declines. And now we're at point B. So an increase in desired savings reduces the real interest rate and increases desired investment. Now let's think about rather a change in autonomous investment instead. So let's suppose for some reason we start at point A, and now business executives become more optimistic about the future of the economy. So as business executives become more optimistic about the future of the economy, they'll want to have a larger capital stock. In order to have a larger capital stock, they'll need to undertake more investment activity. So here, that's true for every level of the real interest rate. So what we should see then is an increase, or rightward shift, of the investment demand curve, desired investment curve. Again, notice that before any adjustment takes place, we now have an excess demand for loanable funds. That excess demand is going to cause the real interest rate to rise, the price of loanable funds, and that will happen until we get to point B. So the real interest rate goes up to R1, savings goes up to S1, and investment goes up to I1. Both saving and investment have increased. Why does saving increase? We understand why investment increased. Businessmen became more optimistic, but why would saving increase? The real interest rate goes up. As the real interest rate rises, consumers want to borrow less money. If they borrow less and their real incomes have stayed the same, then saving rate and savings will rise. Okay. So notice a change in savings drags along a change in investment. A change in investment also drags along a change in saving. What drags them along is the change in the real interest rate. Okay. So as we just saw, an increase in desired investment increases the real interest rate and increases desired saving. Now on Thursday, we'll make it a bit more complicated by opening up the economy to international trade. So we'll have to bring back our NX term and see how that affects things. Have a good afternoon. Don't forget your problem set number 1 is posted on B courses.